I never had a good set in her, but yeah, not embarrassed for I need to see so there was out there. There's where inadequate and never tell us. Yeah. Wait, we're girl. Yeah. I think I well, family was like
All right, 20 seconds.
I mean, still not like it's like you can all look at other people's lives and be like, but he's still not stated. As that Chinese shower that so you're sorry.
We will come back to this towards the end, this idea of heartbreak that can set us up for greatness. But like I said, we're going to look at the life of a guy named Peter, who you may have heard of before. So I'm going to read a brief little story that kind of gives us an introduction so we can get to know what kind of man Peter is. This is from Matthew 16. Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" They, meaning the disciples, replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." Jesus is asking them, "Who do people say I am?" Son of Man is a title he has for himself. Jesus is kind of like Prince, like he kind of refers to himself in the third person sometimes. So he asked them, "Who do people say I am?" And they have these different names they throw out. And he responds and says, "And you," he asked, "who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." So everyone else is coming up with all these different names and kind of speculations. Simon nails it. He says, "You're Messiah, the Son of God." And Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter." He is renaming him here. He's giving him the name Peter. The word Peter, the name Peter literally means rock. "And on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it." That is an epic verse. The idea of gates not overcoming the kingdom is the idea that the church is assaulting the gates of Hades. Like, how do gates prevail? Gates don't move, gates stand in place. And so Jesus is saying to Peter, "I am establishing you as a leader in my early church, and my early church will overcome the gates of Hades itself." We are taking souls with us. That's the mission. That's the message that Jesus is giving to Peter here. "I'll give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." So Peter's, from this little glimpse here, he's a pretty solid guy. Everyone else gets it wrong, but he gets it right. And so some of the strengths that we see in Peter is that he's the first to actually follow Jesus. When Jesus is calling his disciples, Peter and another man are the first two people to respond to Jesus's call. In Matthew 14, we see Jesus is the only disciple to walk on water. So if you've heard the famous story of Jesus walking on water, he invites his disciples to get out of the boat, and Peter's the one who actually gets out of the boat, and he walks on water for a little bit, which is pretty wild. He's part of Jesus's inner three within the disciples. So Jesus had huge crowds of people following him. So you had the general crowds, the general public, and then you had the disciples, which was a few hundred people that were following Jesus. And then you had the 12 disciples. They were like what they come to be known as the apostles, the leaders within the disciples. And then even within the 12, you have these three who are Jesus's closest friends. They're the ones that get to see things that no one else gets to see. And Peter is one of them. And here we just saw Jesus, or Peter is the first to call Jesus the Christ, Son of the living God. And he would go on to become a pillar of the church in Jerusalem, the Bible calls him. He is an important, integral leader in the early church. Peter is passionate, he is driven, he is bodacious. If you're a fan of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, I found out that word was created in that movie. I thought that was always a word. Like, he is audacious, he is bold, he's not timid in any way. And you see this over and over again, both during Jesus' ministry, and you also see this in Acts in the life of the early church. So, if you're thinking about these qualities, these strengths that Peter has, I have a discussion question. I just want you to shout out answers to this. What kind of qualities, whether in yourself or others, could be either a strength or a weakness, depending on the situation? What kind of qualities come to mind as something like Peter is really bold, but in what ways could that maybe also be a weakness at times? And you could use Peter as an example, yourself, or even someone you know. Maybe leave their name out for the sake of, I don't know, their ego. But any thoughts on that? I think it's on. Hello? Should be on. It's not on. Thank you. What kind of qualities? This is open discussion. Talk to me. I'm just kidding. You can talk.
Vulnerability.
Vulnerability? Why would vulnerability be a strength or a weakness depending on the situation?
It draws people near to you, but sometimes you say too much.
So it draws people in, it helps them feel comfortable, but maybe you could be prone to oversharing or trauma dumping, I think is a term that's often used nowadays. Yeah. What else?
Hyperfocus.
Oh, my ADHD sister. What do you mean by hyper focus?
Just well, I mean, basically a lot of risks keep going and fully give up and you accept something you can't, but also those things you might don't do that.
Yeah. I wish I was hyper focused with like laundry or, doing the dishes. But we were just talking the other day about, I was talking to Sean and Maggie was like, have you heard about the hippos in the Amazon? Apparently Pablo Escobar took hippos to South America and now there's a hippo infestation. She spent a whole day telling me about this hyper. And so hyper focus can be really helpful when it comes to, if it's something productive, it's very useful. And when there's other things that need to be done that I'm not hyper focused on, yeah, those things don't get done. So I totally agree. What else? What other qualities can you think of that could be a strength or a weakness?
Passion.
Passion. Why?
That's your, I say it, then you interact with it.
What's that? Okay. All right. So Todd said passion. I think Todd said passion because no, passion definitely, and you see that in Peter actually, right? Passion is energy. Passion is emotion boiled into action. And so what often happens with passion is you have moments of great triumph, you have moments of action, of moving towards broken situations. You can also get passionate about the wrong things. You can also have passion that gets misguided, which we'll see in Peter here in a little bit, actually.
Feelings, freedom words, but being very empathetic or caring.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can get too much, especially to invest in like that feels
Right.
back track.
Right. Right. And so the idea of like empathy or compassion, it means like you feel with them. And that's obviously, you see that in Jesus when he sees the crowds harassed like sheep without a shepherd. The Bible says he had compassion on them, he felt for them. But that compassion didn't paralyze him. It didn't, which it can often do for us. It can make us go, we can be overwhelmed by other people's suffering or emotions and not know what to say. So there's a balance to that. What's that? Loyalty. Yeah, loyalty can be great depending on who you're loyal to. Uh-huh. It's a great answer. And there's many more. I mean, we could go on and on with this, but we're going to see today through Peter's life that many of the personality qualities he has can be good or bad. And we'll see how God meets him in the bad so that they can become good. So we just saw Peter have a really good moment, right? He nails who Jesus is in front of his boys. And so things are going great. But Peter can't ever keep his mouth shut. From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. And so Jesus is telling his disciples over and over again throughout his ministry, the cross is coming. I'm going to be crucified, going to be killed, and I'm going to rise to new life. And the disciples just don't understand this. They're constantly confused by it. And to their credit, Jesus can be kind of confusing, right? You've ever read his parables? They're always confused by his parables. He's always saying, like, I am the bread of life, and you must eat my flesh. And they're like, sure, what does that mean? right? Like and it's a metaphor for something, and it's explaining a spiritual principle. So I can imagine that when Jesus tells them, I must be killed and I'll rise to new life. I wonder, and this is total speculation. This isn't Bible. This is Jason. I wonder if they're like killed and raised to new life. What spiritual reality is Jesus trying to point to? And Jesus is like, no, literally, I'm going to die and I'm going to come back. And Peter, being Peter, took him aside and began to rebuke him, to rebuke Jesus. Never, Lord, he said, this shall never happen to you. So Peter just went from like being praised by Jesus publicly to now, I wonder if it went to Peter's head and he's like, actually, Jesus, let me set you straight on some things here. I think you're missing the picture. And Jesus responds, he turns and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You don't have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. Now, the term Satan, we think of that as a person like Satan or Lucifer. That's actually a title. It just means accuser, or it was often used to refer to opponents. So Jesus is calling Peter an opponent. You're opposed to me and you're opposed to the concerns of God right now because you're thinking in human terms. So we see a high for Peter and we see one of his lows here, where Jesus calls him Satan. So we see some weaknesses of Peter. See that he rebukes Jesus. I mentioned him walking on water. He also sinks. After walking on water, he begins to doubt and starts to sink into the ocean. It's another example of big high and a big low. At the transfiguration, where Jesus is, where Peter and the other two see Jesus before Moses and Elijah, he starts to babble and is talking about we got to build some tabernacles. And Mark literally tells us it's because he didn't know what to say. So in a moment of like excitement, Peter's like, we got to build some tents. Like, we got to do something. He's just kind of babbling. He has this impulsive tendency to speak out when he shouldn't. At one point, when Jesus is washing the disciples' feet, this might be my favorite one, Peter tells him, no, you can't wash my feet. I should be washing your feet. To which Jesus says, if I don't wash your feet, you will not be with me in the kingdom. To which Peter says, make sure you get my pits. Don't miss any spots here. I need a full bath. Like, this is Peter. He's impulsive, he's passionate, he's bold, and he tends to overstep at times. He can be a bit short sighted. And as we'll see today, he is often influenced by others and the opinions of others. His best traits and his worst traits tend to come from the same root. They tend to come from the same place. And so later in Jesus' ministry, we see, we'll kind of build the context for how Peter comes to have a huge failure and how Jesus meets him in that. So in Luke 22, which is where we'll spend most of our time today, it says, when the hour had come, he, Jesus, reclined at the table and the apostles with him. And he said to them, I have earnestly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. So this is describing what's often called the Last Supper. And at the Last Supper, Jesus is preparing the disciples for what's going to come next by encouraging them, by teaching them, trying to help them see what's going to come so they would remember it later. And ultimately, he's also warning them of what is to come. And this is, I love verses like this because it humanizes the disciples. There arose a dispute among them as to which one of them was regarded to be greatest. In another passage, it says they were arguing over who would sit next to Jesus in the kingdom. Like, guys are guys. Like, I called shotgun. I get to be up there with him. Like, I love passages like this. And Jesus said to them, the kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, but it's not this way with you. The one greatest must become the least, and the leader like the servant. This is servant-hearted leadership. He's trying to help them see there's an upside-down way of doing things here. You don't lead through power, you lead through serving. And then again, Jesus builds them up. You are those who have stood by me in my trials. And just as my Father has granted me a kingdom, I grant you that you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and you will sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. That sounds pretty freaking awesome. Like, that's exciting. Yeah, they're arguing over who's going to be greatest. And Jesus is like, actually, you should serve people, but just so you know, there is something epic coming on the other side. There is something epic coming in my kingdom. And if Jesus stopped there, everyone, including Peter, would have left really excited. But he doesn't stop. He says, Simon, Simon, behold. And based on past experiences, I wonder if Peter's like, and by the way, when you see Simon, Cephas, or Peter, those are all the same person. I should have said that earlier. So I imagine Peter, when Jesus goes, Simon, Simon, behold, if his stomach just sinks, like, oh, what now? What did I do now? And Jesus says, Satan has demanded permission to sift you like wheat. To be sifted like wheat. If you were here for my teaching on Gideon, we talked about the idea of sifting wheat happens by violently shaking the wheat so that the chaff and the actual wheat separate from one another. And so what Jesus is saying to Peter here is Satan has demanded to shake you up. Satan has demanded to shake you up to see if you're really what you claim to be, who you claim to be. And it's interesting, the term for demanded permission, it's the same term used when a debtor says, you owe that to me, I demand you to pay me back. That's the language here. Satan's not asking, he's demanding. I get to mess with Peter here. But I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail. And you, once you have turned again, strengthen your brothers. So Jesus is warning Peter, you're going to get shaken up here, but I've prayed for you. And when you come back, when you turn again, it's on you to strengthen your brothers. I'm calling you to strengthen those around you. But Peter, being Peter, said, Lord, I'm ready to go with you both to prison and to death. He's like, no. I'm with you the whole way. I'm ride or die. Like Peter seems like the kind of guy you want in a bar fight. I'm on your side. I'm not going anywhere. In another gospel, Peter replied, even if all fall away on account of you, I never will. Even if these other schmucks, they couldn't even get your name right. They thought you were John the Baptist. I got it right. I'm not going to fall away, even if everyone else does. And Jesus said, I say to you, Peter, the rooster will not crow today until you have denied 3 times that you know me. Got a table or an open discussion here. I'm actually going to make it a table discussion. I want you guys to talk about this at your tables. Imagine someone imagine someone that you anticipate would let you down. Like you're anticipating this, I can't trust this guy, I can't rely on this guy, but I have to. How would you respond or prepare in advance? Imagine someone you anticipate would let you down. How would you respond or prepare in advance? You got 2 minutes. Go. All right.
I'm standing on a person coming into this thing here. Like that one should go.
Twenty seconds. All right, I'm curious. Give me a couple. What are some things that stood out to you guys? Something you like to share to your table?
Sure.
You can share other people's, I think, or work it out later if they didn't like it. But yeah, what stood out to you guys?
I was about my students and how
You're a teacher, right?
yeah, and I have quite a few that are well below grade level. And so there's a lot of activities I have to give them that I know they're gonna struggle with. So I feel like beforehand, I try to like kind of give them a boost of like, you can do this, you
Yeah.
can try. All I ask is that you try.
Yeah.
I anticipate they're not gonna meet a grade level expectation, but I can still hype them up.
Right. Yeah, there's like an empowering, like, hey, I believe in you. You can do this. Maybe give them a little access to the answers sheet a little bit or something. Like you're trying to help them out. Like I got you. You can do this. I believe in you. That's all. That's a very positive spin on that. But it's good. It's great. That's was someone else saying something?
I said it's great. I was thinking it just as a limitation.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
Pretty much all right. Negative.
Yeah, right. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yes. And the teacher student dynamic is actually probably closer to Jesus and Peter's dynamic here, right? But also, yes, like a friend, like screw them, cut them off. I'm done. Bye. Who said bye? That was great. Yep, love it. Like bye, see ya. That's very much my tendency. It's like a Queen of Hearts off with their head. Yeah, we're done here. Yep.
Maybe just anticipate like going through your head what you think might happen, and so how you're gonna respond to that in a gracious,
Yeah.
patient way. I feel like I do this with my kid. Like I try to not be like, this is how Mena's gonna respond.
Uh-huh.
Most likely, based on past
Right.
experiences, she will.
Right.
So I kind of like worst case scenario. Okay, well then how can I respond in a way that's calm and grace filled,
Mm-hmm.
the teaching time rather than just
Yeah.
talking off like I knew this is what you, even though I do this. You know,
Sure.
like
Yeah, you're
of
gaming.
course, this is exactly how I thought you would respond.
Right.
But just doing like anticipating in a way that's gonna be
And like a preparatory, like you're prepping for it. Like, okay, how can I respond well to this?
yes.
That's great. Yeah.
Pretty sure she's not just
Yeah.
it's very fun.
Sure. Absolutely. That's great. I mean, I think what you see in Jesus is it definitely goes against how I would respond. Um, when Jesus tells him, oh, where is it? Where'd it go? Maybe it's on the next slide, actually. No, it's not. When Jesus tells him, I've prayed for you. Hey, this is coming. I know you're going to do this. I've prayed for you. I've already prayed for you. And when you turn, he didn't say if, he said, when you turn back once again, strengthen your brothers. And so there's kind of like what Jenna was saying. There's like a empowering, restorative, hey, when you come back to the fold, it's kind of like the idea of if you've ever seen, maybe Randy is here, maybe Randy's seen this, or maybe some of the guys, but there's a 30 for 30 documentary about the NC State basketball team. And they're in the national, or they're playing for a game to go to the national championship. Guys got to hit a free throw at the end. And they all talk about how much it impacted them when the coach in the moment in the huddle said, when he hits this free throw, here's what we're going to do. Like there's an anticipatory, no, when he comes back, when this happens, here's how we're going to respond. And this is meant for Peter to then reflect on later. And so what we see is that God is not surprised by our failures. When Jesus died on the cross, as far as I know, none of us were alive, unless you're really hanging in there. So all of your sins were future sins. When Jesus died on the cross, everything you've done wrong, everything you will do wrong, had not happened yet. And so for God to be God means he's already aware of the ways you can screw up or even will screw up. So you might be surprised because you didn't think you were capable of that, but he's not. And that's a comfort because it means we're not telling him anything when we go to him with our failures. We're not telling him anything that he doesn't already know. And so after this interaction where Jesus warns Peter, Jesus goes to the Garden of Gethsemane and he takes the three with him, Peter and the other two. And what happens is he asks them to pray for him. And this is through the night. So this is like past midnight. They're tired. Peter falls asleep, which, have you ever fallen asleep praying? Like I have, like you many times. And Jesus even gets frustrated with Peter, saying, couldn't you men keep watch with me for 1 hour? Like in Jesus's dire hour of need, he's sweating blood. He's so stressed about the crucifixion and about what's coming. And he asks his closest friends to come and pray with him. Peter falls asleep. And what we see is that the soldiers then arrive to arrest Jesus. And when they do, when Jesus' followers saw what was going to happen, they said, Lord, should we strike with our swords? And one of them, can you guess who struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his right ear? Again, all the other disciples are like, Jesus, what should we do? And Peter's like, I don't need anyone to tell me what to do. I know what I need to do. He's trying to kill him here, by the way. You don't aim for someone's ear. Like, he's going to kill him, and the guy just is quick and gets out of the way just in time. Peter, being impulsive, when he told Jesus, I will die with you, he's thinking in like war terms. I'll go to battle with you. We're going to take this thing back. I'll die alongside you with a sword in my hand. And Jesus, of course, rebukes him and says, Stop, that's not how this is going to go. And he heals the man, which is crazy, which again confuses Peter. And then seizing Jesus, they led him away and took him into the house of the high priest. Peter followed at a distance. And I want to make a quick point that Peter gets some credit here. He's courageous. All the other disciples have gone into hiding. But when Jesus is arrested, Peter actually follows him. Kind of covert, Assassin's Creed style, just following to see what's going to happen here. And he goes and in the courtyard of the high priest, when some there had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and had sat down together, Peter sat down with them. So these were servants of the high priest, people that would have managed the household. And to them, it would have been, normal for people to get arrested during the night and brought to the high priest. Now, Jesus has developed a reputation at this point, so he's like a high profile arrest. And while sitting around the fire, a servant girl saw him seated there in the firelight. And she looked closely at him and said, This man was with him. But he denied it. Woman, I don't know him, he said. A little later, someone else saw him and said, You're also one of them. You're with Jesus' disciples. Man, I am not, Peter replied. And about an hour later, another asserted, Certainly this fellow was with him, for he is Galilean. I highlighted the hour later because I want to show this doesn't happen. Sometimes when you read the Bible, it seems like it just happens right in a row. Like this is over the course of the evening. Peter's getting asked these things, and every time he's probably like, okay, got away with it, still safe. And then, by the way, when they say he's a Galilean, it's because of the way he talks. He's got an accent. Galilee was kind of the podunk, country area. So he speaks with an accent, and they recognize that. And Peter replied, Man, I don't know what you're talking about. In another gospel, it says he cursed himself. He's like, F me. No, I don't know who this guy is. And just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. If you remember Jesus' prediction, it was that Peter would do this 3 times before the rooster crowed. Open discussion question. Just shout out. Give me some examples of famous betrayal scenes in movies or stories. What are some famous betrayal scenes that you can think of?
Lion King.
Lion King was the first one on my list too. Long live the king. Dude, that shot where it zooms out. Yeah, it's strong. Fun fact, that's based on Hamlet. Didn't know. So Hamlet's another one. What else? Mysterio. Oh yeah. In the new Spider-Man movie, Mysterio acts like he's a friend of Peter, and then turns out he's just using him. Good answer. What else? Any others come to mind? Julius Caesar, et tu, Brute. And you, Brutus? Brutus was Caesar's best friend. And Brutus is the one who actually is the first one to stab Caesar. And in the moment, Caesar supposedly turns around and says, And you? Everyone else is against me, and you're also against me? The Godfather. Man, you guys are nailing it. Yes, right? You broke my heart, Fredo. I can't do an accent, but I'm terrible at accents. But yes, Freeman Fredo betrays him. He says, You broke my heart.
Kevin Durant signing with the Warriors.
Kevin Durant signing with the Warriors. Oh. Betrayal to the game. Betrayal to the game itself. I hope you never watch this. Any others? Anakin, another one I had. You said you would destroy the Sith, not join them, right? Well, absolutely. I had one more that I'm ashamed of you guys for not getting. Toy Story 3, Lotso.
Yes.
Pretty big. That might be the biggest one of all. So you have these betrayals. And it strikes a chord with us, right? So I'm giving you 2 minutes here. What makes these scenes so impactful or emotional? Why does this resonate at such a deep level with us? Talk about that for 2 minutes. Go.
Something just like how you said how perfect thrown well, you like not remember that, but then online it's a big show. Yeah, that was that feeling the that is like yeah, it's usually on it right now. Yeah, their whole generation is project. Except
20 seconds. All right. There's a lot of reasons why these scenes are often the climax of the movie or the big reveal. I think one of them is that we all can relate at some level to feeling betrayed by someone we should have been able to trust, right? Whether that be a parent, whether that be a close friend or a sibling or whoever it is, we all know what it's like. Man, I trusted you. I shouldn't have trusted you. You can get that feeling of that. And you would expect that Jesus would feel that way, knowing that Peter would deny him. So Peter denies Jesus in front of the people 3 times. He hears the rooster crow, and it really is like a movie. In that moment, when the rooster crowed, the Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Man. Then Peter remembered the word. Thank you. Peter remembered the word the Lord had spoken to him. Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and wept bitterly. I don't know who painted this, but man, I liked it. I thought it was in the midst of the hubbub of the trial and everything. Jesus looks directly at Peter. Jesus does not avert his eyes from our failures or our shame. Jesus sees Peter at his absolute worst, and it's not from a distance, and it's not disconnected from him. This is personal to Jesus, and he sees him face to face. Now, if you were in Jesus' shoes, if I was in Jesus' shoes, and I looked at Peter, I can imagine what my face would look like. Probably would have a scowl or like a, told you, boy. Like, right? That's not the look that Jesus gives to Peter. This look is not condemning, which is what we would anticipate, and it's what we would deserve. Jesus' look is actually, in some ways, far worse. It's the kind of look that breaks Peter's heart because he knows Jesus loves him. It's the kind of look that breaks his heart because Jesus doesn't look at him with hatred or resentment, but with love. I still love you, even in the midst of this. And what I love about this is that God does not sweep our shame under the rug. He addresses it fully, but he addresses it as someone who loves us. The good news of the gospel is, or the good news, which sounds like bad news, and it is bad news at first, is that God knows all of your sin, all of your failure. Everything, that thing that no one else knows, that you've never told anyone, God knows about it. He knows about it, and he moves towards you. The gospel is this, that you can be fully known and fully loved. After this, Jesus would go on to be beaten, shamed, and publicly crucified. Soon after, the women run and find the tomb empty and rush to tell the disciples. They're actually told, go tell his disciples and Peter, which seems like it's singling Peter out, like, oh, maybe he's not a disciple anymore. It's actually the opposite effect. It's saying, no, include Peter. He's still one of the disciples. Make sure you tell him as well. And what we know is that Jesus is seen alive by many people after his very public death. And there's a lot of discussion we can have about the facts of the resurrection, which we don't have time for today. But what we know is that Jesus actually appears to Peter personally in a way that we don't know what that conversation looked like, but it is recorded, where the disciples say, the Lord has risen indeed and has appeared to Simon. And Paul himself, in one of his letters, says he appeared to Cephas, who is Peter, and then to the 12, all disciples. So Peter knows that Jesus has returned. Jesus knows that he's resurrected, but he hasn't quite resolved or addressed the whole denying Jesus publicly fiasco. And John 21 shows us how Jesus doesn't sweep it under the rug, but that he addresses it directly. It says in John, afterward, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee, and it happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, Nathanael, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples were all together. I'm going to go fish, Simon Peter told them. And they said, we'll go with you. So they just went back to their old lives, because what else are they going to do? They were fishermen before, and Jesus is back, but we're going to go just keep fishing, I guess. So they went out, got into the boat, and that night they caught nothing. Relatable. And early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore. But the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. And he called out to them, friends, haven't you any fish? No, they answered. And he said, throw your net on the right side of the boat and you'll find some. And when they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Like Jesus is like the perfect fish finder. He's like, it's just on the other side of the boat. It's where they all are. This is a miracle. Like this is Jesus's way of like, this is speculation. I wonder if he's almost like messing with them like a big brother would. Of like, hey, you don't know who I am. Why don't you catch him down the other side of the boat? And then they're like almost drowning from how heavy the net is, you know? I'm a big brother, so I can imagine doing that to my siblings, like if I could do miracles. But then the disciple whom Jesus loved, that's John, said to Peter, it is the Lord. And as soon as Peter heard him say it's the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him since he'd taken it off and jumped into the water. And so while John's the first to recognize Jesus, Peter's the first to like, I'm getting in the water. I got to go see him. I can't wait to get into shore. I'm going to go after him. And when they get to the shore, what they find is that Jesus already had a fire and burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. A little glitch here, ignore that. Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. None of the disciples dared ask him, who are you? Because they knew it was the Lord. I love that. It's like what is it, Wes Anderson? It's like they're all just sitting there eating fish and they're like, yeah, we know who this guy is, but like, what do we do? How do we interact with him now? It's a pretty awkward meal. And this was the 3rd time that Jesus appeared to his disciples. And so there's some potential doubts as they're eating this meal that could be going through Peter's head. Was Jesus wrong to call me Peter? Was he wrong to call me a rock? Because I crumbled pretty dang quickly. Does he want me to be here or is he just being nice? You ever felt that way with someone? Like, they're just being nice. They don't actually want me around. Can he ever trust me again? Or can I even trust myself? Do I know myself? Like, Peter was so sure he would never turn away. And then he did. I mean, talk about a crisis of identity. Like, I thought I'd never do that. And then I did. What if I stumble? What if I screw up? What if I fall? This is actually a song I love called What If I Stumble? Go look it up. What's next? What now? Okay. Thought Jesus was going to kick Rome out and reestablish his kingdom. Instead, he died and rose again. I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. Did I ever really love him? Am I still called a disciple? Or did I lose that? I mean, these are all potential doubts that Peter could be having, or many of them ones that I would be having, thoughts that I would have. Because again, at this point, Jesus has not directly addressed his denial. And so what we see here is Jesus turns to Peter and he asks him three questions with three responses in a row. When they finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my lambs. And again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, tend to my sheep. And the third time he said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt. And he said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. So, quick question for anyone bold. Why do you think, I want you to answer, why do you think Jesus asks him this three times in a row? Any suspicions? What's that? Because he denied him three times. That's why he's doing this. Jesus is inviting Peter to, and mirroring his denial, inviting him to reaffirm his love for him. God never asks questions for his own knowledge, ever. He's God. He knows the answer. So when he asks a question, your ears should perk up and go, what is God trying to communicate here? He is reaffirming Peter within himself. And he's answering some of those questions that Jesus or that Peter might have had, some of those doubts. Did I ever really love him? He's given him three chances to say, yeah, you love me. I know that you love me. Just because you failed, just because you fell short, doesn't mean you don't love me. When he says, what next or what now? He gives him three commands saying, feed my lambs, tend to my sheep, feed my sheep. If you were here during the Good Shepherd series, we talked about this, the nuances between these three commands. That to feed my lambs means to care for the young, to tend to my sheep means to cultivate life and to care for people's well being. And then to feed the sheep is to feed the old, take care of the old as well. Give them what they need. Teach them the gospel. Walk with them. Show them what it looks like to live within this new kingdom that I've established. And there's something else within this as well. Jesus is saying to Peter, I'm handing you responsibility over the thing that is the most precious to me. That's significant. If anyone's not trustworthy at this point of the disciples, it probably should be Peter. But Jesus is telling Peter, no, I trust you to feed my sheep, the ones that I've died for. Like Jenna was saying earlier with the students, he's empowering Peter, saying, I believe in you. I will empower you to do great things. I have a little girl named Isla that I love to death, and I would not trust just anyone with her. There's a few people that I trust. It's my sister, and then the Stick Girls, and my wife, and some of you. I won't say who. We'll work through that later. But like, you don't just trust anyone with what's precious to you. But Jesus entrusts his sheep to Peter. Jesus goes on to say, very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you're old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. What's this mean? Well, Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. So again, Jesus letting him know, you're going to die. And you're going to die in a harsh way. And then he said to him, again, movie moment, follow me. What was the command that Jesus gave Peter when he first met him? It was follow me, come after me. So when Peter's wondering, am I called? Am I still a disciple? Jesus is saying, yep, you're still one of mine. So follow me, come after me, imitate me. So God meets us in failure. And when he does, he's not just helping Peter feel better about himself. This is not a self-actualization project. Now, to be clear, hating yourself is not helpful either. So this isn't saying like, hey, the way you think about yourself doesn't matter. I'm saying your ultimate like self-worth is not the end goal here. It is a byproduct of being fully known by God and fully loved. And so there's something bigger here. God is wanting you to draw your eyes up beyond yourself to see how you fit within his cosmic plan to restore all things to himself. And so within that, he gives him work. He gives him responsibilities. He gives him something to do. God talked about this with Elijah. When Elijah's struggling with personal darkness, one of the ways God ministers to him in that is by giving him something to do. I struggle with depression. You know what's not good for depression? Doing nothing. I've never gotten better by sitting around, ever. I've always gotten better by going outside, touching grass, taking a shower, like doing something, getting moving. Helps us process what's happened and have an end goal and a purpose in mind that we move towards. And again, Jesus entrusts what is most precious to him to Peter. So we had that call, or that quote rather, at the beginning, where the composer said that the singer would become truly great when something would happen to her to break her heart. Peter's heart here has been broken by the recognition of his own failure. So how does God use this brokenness? Well, what we see is that pre-failure Peter, and being a leader in the early church, likely would have been a confident, brash shepherd. If the Gospels are any indication of how he would have treated people, he would have steamrolled people, he would have talked over people, he would have cursed people. Like he probably would have been pretty harsh. But after his failure, he's now prepared to be the humble, tender shepherd that Jesus calls him to be. Because Peter himself knows what it is to fail and to be received back. And we actually have an example of how this affected Peter in the New Testament, which we'll jump through pretty quickly here. But basically, there is a huge conflict in the early church where Paul, who is a minister of the gospel, he was given the ministry to the Gentiles, that's to the non-Jews, directly opposes Peter in front of other people. This is Paul writing in Galatians 2. When Cephas or Peter came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face. By the way, respect. Like Paul's a real one. He's like, I'm not going to talk about you. I'm going to talk to you. And yeah, they can listen too because we got to deal with this. Because he stood condemned. Why? Because before certain men came from James, he used to eat with the Gentiles. But when they arrived, he began to draw back and separate himself from the Gentiles because he was afraid of those who belonged to the circumcision group. And the other Jews joined him in his hypocrisy, so that by their hypocrisy, even Barnabas was led astray. Barnabas, the son of encouragement, the nicest guy in the world, himself is also now showing partiality and not eating with the non-Jewish people because they're afraid of the circumcision group or the Jews in the church in that area. And so Paul says, when I saw they weren't acting in line with the truth of the gospel, I said to Peter in front of them all, you're a Jew, and yet you live like a Gentile and not a Jew. How is it then that you force Gentiles to follow Jewish customs? This is what the circumcision group was doing. They were trying to impose the Old Testament law on the new believers who were not themselves Jewish. And he says sarcastically, we who are Jews by birth and not sinful Gentiles know that a person is not justified by the works of the law, but by faith in Jesus Christ. In other words, you should know better. You should know that we couldn't justify ourselves on the basis of this law. So why would you put this on the new believers who aren't even Jewish themselves? Through which Paul proclaims, for through the law I died to the law so I might live for God. I've been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live. I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. So Paul directly opposes Peter in front of other people. Quick, open discussion. How would you respond to this? Being opposed in front of other people like this? Being called out like this? How would you respond? Well, I would not respond well. Like this could have been a private conversation, right? Or maybe I need to justify myself. Maybe I need to defend myself. Or actually, you know who's talking to him here? Paul. You know what Paul did? You know what Saul did? It's like, I got some issues with you too, buddy. You had some of my friends killed previously. I think of all people to call me out. I don't know that you should be the one calling me out, right? There's all kinds of ways that we defend ourselves, justify ourselves, lash out at others. So is that, and based on what we've seen from Peter, that's what we should expect from him, right? Impulsive, brash. That's not what we see. Just after this, in Acts 15, a council is held where Paul and Barnabas come to Jerusalem and they're welcomed by the church. And some of the believers who were Pharisees stood up and they made this claim. The Gentiles must be circumcised and they should be required to keep the law of Moses. And so the apostles and elders met to consider this question. And after much discussion, Peter got up and addressed them. So if you're Paul in the room and Peter's gotten up and you just had this big blowout of opposition to him, it's like, Oh man, how's this thing going to go? And Peter said, brothers, you know that some time ago God made a choice among you that the Gentiles might hear from my lips the message of the gospel of belief. God, who knows the heart, showed that he accepted them by giving the Holy Spirit to them, just as he did to us. He did not discriminate between us and them, which is what he was doing. But that's what Paul was calling him out for. For he purified their hearts by faith. Now then, why do you try to test God by putting on the necks of Gentiles a yoke that neither we nor our ancestors have been able to bear? No, we believe it is through the grace of our Lord Jesus that we are saved, just as they are. So Peter, who once tried to correct Jesus, is now receiving correction, accepting correction from Paul, of all people. And what we see here is that our weaknesses can become our strengths, but only through humility. His impulsiveness becomes boldness, where he speaks up at the council when it matters. His zeal becomes courage. His brashness becomes forthrightness. He's direct, but has no need to protect himself. Whereas before he was influenced by others out of self-concern, now he has concern for the well-being of others. And ultimately, his pride becomes humility, and he's able and willing to receive correction from his brother. And this is a cool scene because the room gets quiet right after this, and then Paul stands up to speak. So Peter actually sets up Paul, tell them about everything that God is doing in the world at that time. So through Peter's story, we have some takeaways of how God meets us in failure. We see that God is not surprised by your failures. He is outside of time. You may be surprised by them. He is not. And sin dies in the light. So bringing it before him is the first step towards healing. We see that God sees and addresses our failures, which is good news. It's uncomfortable. Like God looks at the ugliest parts of you and he's addressed them in the cross of Jesus Christ. And that God forgives our failures if we put our faith in Jesus, which is even better news. So God fully knows all of your flaws and faults and shortcomings, and he addresses them in the cross. We also see that God entrusts us with his work. The Bible says that we've been given the ministry of reconciliation. Like God has invited us into what he's doing. And oftentimes that's one of the best ways to process failure is to move ahead. In fact, usually you only grow through failure. We see that humility allows weaknesses to turn into strengths. And that ultimately brokenness prepares us to be useful. Peter's heart had to be broken before he could feed the sheep. He had to be humbled to soften those rough edges. Failure is not the disqualifier that we treat it as. In fact, in God's economy, it may be the very thing that makes us useful. Oftentimes, the things we're ashamed of, the failures we've had, only serve to show the glory and greatness of God in spite of us. That's what makes Paul's story so incredible. The guy who used to kill Christians is now the one who writes most of the New Testament. Like, that's what the power of God at work. That's what glorifies God. God is not glorified by your strength. He's glorified by your weakness, which he strengthens you to grow through. And that's how we see that God meets us in our failures. And the question is not whether we will fail, it's whether we will allow God to meet us in that and do the work that it's supposed to. So with that said, that's what I've got for our time. Got any questions, comments, concerns, disagreements? Those are fun. This thing is turned on. Okay. I know it's turned on by the little rustling noises that have been happening. Any questions or comments? All right. As far as announcements go, I really only have one, and I forgot to make a slide for it. But for the summer, we are going to be meeting at the press. So we've been kind of trying to figure out the logistics of that and what that will look like. If you were at our Easter gathering, we'll be in that same room. It'll look a little bit different. That will begin on May 24th. We'll be doing a brunch the week prior. And then we will be alternating between teachings and brunches for the summer at the press building. One big thing, and by the way, this will be put out in the Discord. One big adjustment is that we will have to move our meeting time up to 9 o'clock, 9 a.m. So get ready to get up. We'll have coffee there, don't worry. And we will need to start at 9 o'clock. So it's not like 9 o'clock, but it's actually 9:05. Like we have to start at 9 o'clock. And so I would ask that you prioritize trying to get there early or on time or even early, but more details to come about that. With that said, why don't we have a couple people pray and we'll be done.
Lord, that your heart bends towards us, most fully in our struggles. And
Peter and that's
Lord, thank you for fully seeing us and inviting us to lean into your tender, caring love. Pray against any shame that is not rooted in your gospel, but rather teach us conviction so that we can see what areas of our lives we can bring to you and invite you and others who love you into that. Help us to see the ways that you are using our past to glorify yourself and preparing us for the work that you have for us. Thank you for examples like Peter so that we can know that even as when we fall short, you look at us tenderly and love us and do not turn away from us. Amen. Let him know again. Yeah, who's the house?
what? I feel like it's very hard.